Warren Jeffs, take one. Before I begin, I believe it's important to clarify a few things before I make comment on someone's religion. There's a few disclaimers I'd like to make before we begin, along with some trigger warnings. There will be mention of bigamy, child marriage, and child sexual assault. This presentation isn't being made as an attack on Mormon or fundamentalist people. Rather, I'll be looking at an extremist leader of an off-branch that ended up causing great harm. We'll be looking at Utah, the state, as a hotbed of religiosity, Warren Jeffs' path to power, and what Western fundamentalism can look like. In no way am I trying to say that all Mormons or people who practice polygamy perpetuate criminal acts. Rather, I'll be doing an overview of Jeff's time in leadership. So, without further ado, here is a prophet of power and polygamy. Jeffs must fall. The Jello Belt, Warren Jeffs, and practicing polygamy. So, what even is Mormonism? What's LDS? Mormonism, also referred to as Latter-day Saints, originated with the teachings of Joseph Smith in the early 19th century. To best picture how these three groups, Mormons, Latter-day Saints, and FLDS, are related, imagine a Russian nesting doll of religious subsects. LDS is the largest denomination under Mormonism, and FLDS is a breakaway sect from LDS. Let's look closer into each of these groups. The LDS Church follows the Book of Mormon, has millions of members worldwide, and its headquarters are in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, the FLDS follows Mormon teachings, meaning it adheres to its traditional beliefs, including a strict hierarchical, patriarchal structure, and includes plural marriage or polygamy. The fundamentalist Latter-day Saints are considered to be outside the realm of mainstream Mormonism. Now, who is Warren Jeffs and what did his path to power look like? Warren Jeffs, born in 1955, to father Rulon Jeffs. Rulon was the president of the FLDS at the time, but he passed in 2002. His son Warren explained to his colony that he had taken over his father's spirit and was now the one true prophet. Leadership roles in the FLDS community are not earned or appointed. They are entirely dependent on lineage. Warren stood out as the next heir as his interest in power and his subtle charisma set him apart from his dozens of brothers. Warren's leadership in Hilldale, Utah was extremely controlling, dictating every aspect of his followers' lives. Under his rule, the FLDS became more isolated, with reports of physical and sexual abuse emerging from within the community. In 2006, Jeffs was arrested on charges involving the sexual assault of minors based on his practices of arranging child marriages and having several child brides himself. Then, in 2011, Jeffs was convicted on multiple accounts of felony child sexual assault and was ultimately sentenced to life in prison plus 20 years. The leaked information about his sexual abuse of young girls has a number of FLDS members quite disillusioned with his leadership and his prophetic claims. Now, looking at polygamy. What polygamy means and what that means in terms of fundamentalists. Within the context of our course, polygamy involves having two or more spouses at the same time. In the FLDS community, we see polygyny, the practice of a man being married to two or more women at the time. Some cited advantages of polygyny include high status, economic advantages, and political assets. Within North America, Utah is the immediate example of polygyny in our text, with fundamentalist Mormon families still practicing to this day. The underlying motivation for the practice of polygamy within their community is derived from early teachings in Mormonism, in which multiple wives are required for the highest level of salvation. As a core tenet of their faith, It allows them to reach spiritual exaltation. In a more practical sense, it allows for the creation of faithful followers and the continuation of powerful lineages. In maintaining family ties, FLDS communities typically practice endogamy, wherein marriages are arranged within the community and individuals are expected to marry within the FLDS faith. This practice preserves purity of their faith. Endogamy within FLDS communities also helps to reinforce social cohesion and hierarchy, as marriages that occur within closely related families. This leads to the concentration of power and influence within specific families. Jeff's practice of controlling the marriages within his colony was due to his interest in regulating the spread of power. The practice of polygamy was prohibited in the 1890 Manifesto of the FLDS community. This outlaw may have been a result of the growing social taboo around polygamy. Falcon's study looked at the decline of polygamy in America, stated that social justifications that support polygamous marriage are recognized, but the practice remains taboo in the eyes of the law. Next, looking at the previous abusive practices that Warren Jeffs and his father Rulon Jeffs had within the community. There has been a lot of discourse around abuse occurring within the FLDS community, particularly under Jeff's rule. With a lot of anti-polygamist legislation coming from the Congress in the late 1800s, the thought was granting women the right to vote would help to alter the national image of Utah women as downtrodden and oppressed. It's difficult to determine whether the perception of women changed after their right to vote was restored. In terms of confirmed abuse, there has been a lot of hurt caused by this so-called prophet. His charges include criminal conspiracy, sexual assault, child abuse, and rape. The child brides in the community were often married off without their consent. This is referred to as bigamy. His coercive practices to manipulate others into perpetuating further abuse made him an incredibly cruel leader. Again, I just want to emphasize that I am not trying to state that all FLDS people or Mormon people or anyone that practices polygamy is doing something criminal or perpetuating further abuse. I'm just referring to this specific case that we're talking about today. Next, we'll be looking at why Utah, both legally and historically. What's the Jello Belt? So one of my main questions entering my research for this presentation is why Utah? What makes it such a hotbed for fundamentalist religions? Although I haven't been able to fully answer this, I have found some background information that helps to explain why Utah, particularly Salt Lake City, has historically been so religiously concentrated. Here are a few reasons as to why Utah is a hub for Mormon culture. First, many settled there in the 19th century under the leadership of Brigham Young. The lack of regulations and government oversight allowed many who were searching for religious freedom to migrate there in droves. Utah has the highest concentration of LDS and FLDS members, so many that has come to be known as the Jello Belt. This colloquial term comes from Jello's long-time association with Mormon and LDS people at community potlucks and events. This term is also made in jest as Mormons and FLDS people tend to not drink alcohol as a part of their religion, so Jello was kind of a substitute for them. Salt Lake City, Utah hosts the headquarters of LDS. One study looking into the secularization of Utah examined the lack of religious competition and the strong hold the Mormon faith has had on the state for centuries. From what I've been able to find, its physical location comes down to historical migrations, looser government regulations, and the tight-knit communities formed within the state. Just to wrap up here, I wanted to clearly state once again, despicable crimes committed in the name of a religion, any religion, are the fault of the leader, not the religion itself. There's not some direct connection to a god or gods that they preach about. Uplifting someone to the status of prophet or martyr inflates their ego, a fault that all humans are prone to. So as I've said in my visual presentation here, individuals who claim that religion is the immediate default behind this abuse, looking at their leaders and people in power who are choosing to manipulate religious principles or the power and tenets behind religion are the ones responsible for the abuse committed. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.